right, welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Stier from Belle Plaine PD in Minnesota. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's a few things that we talked about offline that I think were really unique and interesting. So, welcome to the show, Chief Stier. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. I don't think I asked you offline, how many years have you been in law enforcement total?
So I have 22 years in law enforcement, all in Minnesota. 21 of those have been in the city of Belle Plaine. So I've never left. I grew up here, was born and raised in the city, and now I protect it.
That's amazing. Yeah, can you give a little bit of background into your career? I know you said you've been at the same agency for the most part, but what are some of the various assignments and some of the things that you've learned along the way?
Sure. So I started as a part-time police officer back in 2003. Back then in Minnesota, you had to work several part-time jobs in order to get a full-time job. You would apply against 300 to 500 people. Larger cities, I applied in the city of Eden Prairie, and there was probably 3,000 people in a gymnasium that took a test, and there was one open position. So that's what I faced with. So I worked several small agencies as part-time. I finally got a full-time job in a neighboring city. I worked there for 6 months, and then I moved back to Belle Plaine where I wanted to be. Started at full time in Belle Plaine and then worked my way up to be the investigator, which then the title changed to detective. I moved to sergeant, then was detective sergeant, and in 2020 I became chief. So that's pretty much my background into where I'm at now. And then I was elected into the House of Representatives in 2025. This was my first year in the House of Representatives for Minnesota.
I love it. I am always so amazed when I talk to leadership because you guys always make me feel like an underachiever because you guys are all overachievers. What
Yeah.
was your favorite role so far that you've had in your career?
I will always say that being the road boss, the road sergeant, patrol sergeant, that is the best job in law enforcement. You're right in the middle. You keep your guys. You're still in the action. You're not, buying into the political stuff yet. You're just taking orders and passing them down. That by far is my favorite um, position.
Do you think that you learned any lessons in that particular role that you could pass along to someone who's listening today?
Yeah, it's you know, there's good leaders and bad leaders, and I've worked for both. So when you're working for a bad leader, you try and soften the blow as a sergeant to your patrol staff. And when you work for a good leader, you don't have to do that. You follow orders, you go do what you have to do, and it's much more streamlined. It makes for such a better working environment when you have patrol sergeants that are happy, cops that are happy, admins happy. It's rewarding and refreshing to come to work. But working under horrible leadership is not fun. If you have an opportunity and you don't like where you're working, there's plenty of job opportunities out there. Um, that's my advice is, don't work for a horrible leader.
Do you think, though, that by having that experience of working with bad leaders, that that helped you to become the leader that you are today?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I witnessed what my previous chief, and I hate to talk bad about him, but I witnessed the things that he did, and he tore the department apart. And my job as the number two was to bring the department together. So as he was tearing it apart, I was trying to put it back together. And I reversed many policies that he had in place when I took over. And some of the employees that liked him left initially,
Mm.
and I built my own department. So there's 5 out of 13 of us right now that have come up together. I have 22 years, and the next one is 21, and then 20 years, and then I think 19. So we've worked together for now 19 to 22 years, and we're friends on the outside, and yeah, we work well together.
Yeah. I heard this expression of if you don't like how things are, promote. And so it's this opportunity to say, like, hey, like, if you want to see change, if you want to do something bigger and better, then it's your opportunity to be the one who does that and rise through the ranks so that you can make a difference. Have you heard that expression? Do you believe in that expression?
I do, and you can, and that's why I joined the House or I ran for office. Was you can either complain about things in the coffee room, or you can go and actually do something.
Yeah.
So getting yourself into trainings that would propel you into a sergeant role at some point, and then looking at your department and saying, I have 10 years of service in. I'm going to be a sergeant in my 12th to 15th year. What does the retirements look like? On top of that, can I move to be a lieutenant, and can I be chief someday if that's what you want to do? But if you're in a department where you're 40 years old, there's a 40-year-old sergeant, a 40-year-old lieutenant, and a 40-year-old chief, your odds of moving up are not very good.
Mm.
So you either stay where you're at or you move somewhere else. Um, and I'm not saying to leave your department if it's a great department, but you can also be an informal leader. You don't have to be a sergeant to be a leader. And I have three people right now that are informal leaders, and they're all my field training officers. They um, probably have more influence in the department than I do. When I pass something down, I run it by them. What are your thoughts on this? And they're not afraid to speak their mind. And that's one of the faults of leadership, is thinking that you can just toss an idea down because you think it's good and everybody's going to run with it. You have to bounce it off people before your sergeants and your informal leaders and maybe your rookie cop. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
It can't just be, this is the way it is.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. Well, and I think too, like I think you can apply that same idea of, um, you can either complain about it or you can do something about it to life. There's been so many times that I've experienced this in my own personal life because I'm far from perfect, but also times I'm sure everyone can relate where you have a friend or a family member that is just complaining about everything. And you're like, if you don't like it, change it or change your mindset about it. There's things that you can do, to change your current situation. And I've had to give that advice to myself, and I've also had to give that advice to people around me. And I think it is hard to see people who are maybe stuck in that loop of like, I don't like this, I'm just going to complain about it, rather than taking action and figuring out how can you change that situation for yourself, or for your mindset to be able to maybe even think about something in a different way. So I like that perspective of like, hey, if you don't like it, what can you do?
right. And that's, you know, um, in 2020, after civil unrest to 2025, law enforcement in Minnesota has been under attack.
Mm.
Mandated policies, recruitment and retention issues. And I complained about it and complained about it that we have to fix this, we have to stop this. So I could have just said, I'm going to put my faith into the legislature and they're going to change it. But I didn't. The only impact was my family. And I made sure my family was on board
Hmm.
with me taking another role and being in the house, making changes. We stopped a lot of things that would have impacted law enforcement horribly. And it was mostly because the people there had no idea what we do for a living. They don't know what our street cops do. So it was more of an education part of it, stopping the bad from happening. And yeah, my department ran well while I was gone. I got things done in the house. So I feel like I accomplished what I was going for. So
Can you expand on that a little bit? Some of the things that you were seeing and some of the changes that you were trying to make?
sure. So one of the things that we had in Minnesota was after civil unrest, we had a mass exodus of cops, and they all went out on PTSD. There was a particular law firm that would send out letters to all cops in Minnesota saying, if you have PTSD, call me, essentially.
Mm.
And we saw Minneapolis PD, which was the largest police department in the state of Minnesota, their numbers shrank. I believe they went down 300 or 400 cops, maybe 500. And then recruiting and retention is an issue. And this particular law firm would negotiate and sue cities and come up with a payout for the officer plus medical until they're 65. It was commonly referred to as the golden ticket in law enforcement, to call this law firm, go through the process, and the law firm would make roughly $40,000 per officer. So
Mm.
that's money right out of the officer's pocket. So we stopped the bleeding in the pension system by removing the fact that the officer can no longer sue and the city can no longer sue. So it's a streamlined process of, you believe you have PTSD, you go in for an assessment, and then if you are determined to have PTSD, you're out. The city can't sue, the officer can't sue. You have a defined benefit plan. It used to be until you were 65. Now it's 5 years. So we're going to try and bridge that gap somehow in legislation moving forward where we can get it from 5 years a little bit longer. It's just a percentage. We have to get more stakeholders at the table. But that legislation did pass this year in Minnesota. So we stopped the bleeding in the pension system and we gave our retirees a raise for the first time since 2016.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see that you're really proud of it. And I think when we
Yep.
talked originally, this had not passed yet, right? This is something that just happened recently.
Yep. The governor signed it 2 or 3 weeks ago. I got to go up. The governor signed it, and it was a big deal. So, yeah,
And you were saying that this was detrimental for people who had PTSD to like get help, right? This was something that was kind of prohibitive. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So I had a few friends in law enforcement that went out on PTSD, and they're my friends, and they have PTSD. And it was the issues that we were seeing was officers that couldn't make it through field training or couldn't make it through probation that were getting released would file a PTSD claim.
okay.
And they were giving a bad name to the rest of the cops that really need it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I want to fix is if you're a cop and you have PTSD, which all of us do, there's no question. It's just how you deal with it. Uh, it's we need to find a way to hit those people and find them and take care of them. You know, it's the ones that are trying to screw the system. That's not helpful. So I'm not sure how we're going to fix that yet, but we're going to work on it.
Yeah. I think the ultimate goal is that the people who need help are getting the help that they need.
Yeah.
And I know we talked a little bit about this, and I would love your insights on PTSD and, what resources you think that agencies can offer or, outside providers can offer to help them have, more of the healthy coping mechanisms and the resources they need to deal with what they're going through.
So it's interesting. We do the checkup from the neck up.
Yeah.
That was started in Minnesota, and that's a 45-minute phone call. It used to be in person, and officers requested to do it from home, and that's fine. So they do that from home. But we're kind of dealing with four different categories of cops when you talk about wellness. And I wrote it down here, so I'm going to look at my notes. But the retired class is the people that taught people like me that have 20 years of service plus. So we were taught that suck it up. Um, Here's a beer, figure it out. Um, in war stories, tell your story. So that's how my mental preparedness was
Yeah.
having a field trainer yell at me and say, you know, you're fine, knock it off. And then we taught the next class down, which would be anybody that has like 10 or 20 years of service, that same philosophy of you're fine, you don't need to talk to anybody, there's a stigma. And then this new class came in, the rookie class, and it's like, maybe we need to start doing something. We're seeing people leave. And why are they leaving? And what's this PTSD thing? And now we realize that we missed so much between my career for the last 22 years. Um, it's just been suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah.
But there's no question that I have PTSD. There's no question that my sergeants have PTSD. It's we found a way to work with it, and we found a way to bring our home life into our work life and make it better. We found outlets, somebody that you can talk to. We can talk to each other about problems that we have. It's just trying to figure out how do we bring ourselves from being taught this over and over and over again that you're fine and have a beer to now this new class coming in of how do we take care of them? How do we make them mentally tough? How do we make them financially secure? I don't. It's we're getting there, but we're not there. There's no magic, potion that we can give them that says, this is the healing button or this is the healing medication. So we really have to hit them when they're here and when they're at home and notice when something's up. It's are they having trouble at home? Is it a financial issue? What can we do? And my department is small enough where I can keep a pulse on that. We've had officers go through divorces here, paying child support, financial situations. So we really come together and try and help. Um, and that never existed before. It was always this is your profession and you're a cop 24/7, 365. And this new generation this is just a job. They work 40 hours and don't want to work anymore. So it's just a shift of we need to hit those officers that we need to hit. And we also need to repair the officers that didn't get any help for the last 20 years. So,
I think that's an important reminder that it isn't always touched on. I think that a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too on this platform of talking about like how can we support the younger generation? How can we make sure that they have the resources? But I think it's a really important reminder to say, hey, there's a lot of people who have been in this career a long time. There's a lot of people who have retired from this career, and it's important that they also have the resources that they need because they didn't have those things previously. And we know, like you said, there was a culture of suck it up or drink it away. And, we know the typical unhealthy coping mechanisms that come with that. And I know you said, divorce is maybe a symptom of that. What are some of the coping mechanisms that you're still seeing that maybe aren't being talked about or aren't being addressed?
yeah, there's four things that I think, cops are going to get themselves in trouble with: alcohol, gambling, women and men, and drugs. Those are the things that, we have addictive personalities for the most part. And if you're having problems and you turn to the bottle, that's not good. If you turn to gambling, that's not good. I always tell the new cops when they start, don't go out and buy a brand new truck, and then they all do, don't go out and buy a new boat, and they all do. And it's like, what are you doing? Stop and get yourself financially secure. And I was like that too when I started. It was every cop in the parking lot had a brand new truck. So I had to go out and buy one. And then I struggled to make the payments. I had to work overtime, which was taking away from me being at home and going to sporting events and birthdays. But I tried to do the best I can when they come in. And, the things that are the coping mechanisms that we see now with the new generation is video games.
Mm.
So they'll have a bad day at work and they go home and play video games. They're not reaching out. They just kind of go into their little area and they just focus on the video game. I'm not a gamer by any means, but it's trying to get them out of that. Don't just go home and, you have a wife, you have a kid, you have a husband and kids. Don't tuck yourself in to that little room. Talk to your wife, talk to your spouse, talk to your partners.
Yeah.
And it's getting them to open up
Yeah.
first is the main thing. And once they find an outlet, they can keep going back to it.
I think it's important to really recognize that there are really those two paths, right? And the one path that you just explained was escaping, numbing, avoiding, isolation, right? It's this like quick fix to a deeper issue. And it does feel good in the moment. It is that quick hit of dopamine, right? Like if you go and spend something, and I've had this in throughout my life where there's an indication, like there's a direct correlation between like my happiness and my spending. Like I definitely will do that where I'm like online shopping, I have like a bunch of carts full of stuff, and I'm like, and usually if I'm doing that, it's an indication that I'm not actually dealing with something that I need to, and I'm really stressed. And so I think that you do get those really quick hits of dopamine, and it feels good to numb out and to not have to deal with those things. But the long term effect of that is detrimental. And so you can find healthy coping mechanisms that still have that quick dopamine hit that make you feel good, but you're being more present. You're doing things in a healthier way. And the long term result of that is going to be much better for you and your family than you going and drinking a bottle of vodka every night or whatever it is. And so I think if we can really take a moment to zoom out and say, these are both going to make us feel good in the short term, but only one of them is going to make you feel good in the long term and create that longevity in your life.
Right. One is the easy button and the other one's the hard button. You know, it's pick your path. It's drinking is the easy button. You can go get alcohol anywhere you want. And, picking your family, that's the tougher part. Getting through it, talking, open up, go to a therapist, do yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that cops would be like, my cops my age are like, no way I'm doing that. But that's what we need to do. We need to understand that you can't turn to the bottle, you can't turn to drugs, you can't, every time something bad happens, you can't go out and buy something new to make yourself feel happy. The effects of that are long term, like you said. I mean, you said it way better than I did. I'm just trying to turn it into the older cops and say, knock it off.
Sure. Well, I think it's so interesting that you said that because I agree with you that the escaping and the numbing and the unhealthy coping mechanisms are the easy way out. But it's so interesting to me because there's still this view that if you do the other things that are harder, that makes you weak. And it's like, to me, in my brain, I'm like, I can't comprehend that thought process. I mean, I get it, I understand where it's coming from. But like, if you're saying that this healthy outlet is harder, it takes harder, like more effort and strength to do this thing than to hit the easy button and just drink it away, then why is this perception that the harder thing makes you weak? To me, it's the reverse. You going and I don't want to say that word. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. You taking that like quote unquote easy way out and allowing alcohol to have control over you, allowing, other addictions like sex addiction, gambling addiction, whatever it is that you're doing, allowing that to have control over you, to me is weakness, not strength.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, I think that the younger generation gets it and the older generation doesn't get it yet. I mean, a fishing trip that I was just on last year with a bunch of cops, and we rolled in several cases of beer, and that's just, at night we would drink beer, tell war stories.
Sure.
And a younger cop coming into that, seeing us doing that, is probably not helpful, to them. It's just, that's how we've been raised, that's how we handle things. And I pulled away from that. I do the mental health check-in. I'm trying to take care of myself emotionally, mentally, so that I can be that person for the department and for my family. I For many years I put my family second, and
Yeah.
most of our cops in my age group did. This new generation has kind of got it figured out. It's just we have to catch them before they hit the easy button and get them on the path of, like, this is normal. There's no stigma by going to talk to a therapist. This is normal. And I do think we'll get there, but it really has to be a nationwide push. It has to be, all the cops in the mid-range need to accept it and go get help. And the older generation, I don't want to say we're a lost cause, but some of us need to go get help.
Well, I like that
So,
you said yet. I think that that's a hopeful statement of maybe they're not there yet. But I think that it takes, I mean, you come, like you said, from that like quote unquote older generation, older ideology of what wellness was or wasn't. And it's leaders like you, because everyone right now, for the most part, who's sitting in an executive seat is from that generation, right? And so we're seeing across the country individuals like yourself who are like, hey, I did come from this, but to be a leader and to be able to support today's environment, I have to have an open mind and I have to be willing to grow and adapt. And so I think that through these conversations and through leaders like yourself, we're going to start to see that change and that growth. I know you said to me offline, and this stuck with me. You said we can do things organizationally when they're at work, like we can provide the resources, we can provide the training, the education, we can check on them, we can support them while they're here, but we don't have a lot of control over their actions when they're not here. And you said in your quotes like, this is where we're losing them. Can you expand a little bit on that, and how you think that you can bridge that gap of, being able to support them organizationally, but also when they're not there?
sure. So my generation of cop, we would get together. The thin blue line, that was a thing back when I started. It was, we would go to cops barbecue. We would be at birthday parties. We were all together, and whatever shift you were on, that group went fishing together. That group went hunting together. You would go shopping together. The wives got together. The husbands got together. It was a very tight group of friends, and you would go to work and you'd be friends on the outside. And what we're seeing now is that, I don't want to say the thin blue line is shattered, but it's more of a, not a camaraderie thing when they're at work. They come to work, work their 10 hours, and they go home. And we take care of them when they're here. But as soon as they go home, we don't know what they're doing. We don't know if they're drinking. We don't know if they're gambling. We have really no control because we don't know. The friendship part of it is gone. So what we try to do here in a smaller department is I know all the wives and husbands of the people that work here. So it's just a check in, maybe once every 3 months of how are things,
Mhm.
how is, my cop doing? And sometimes it's not well, and then I need to dig in and not burn the husband or spouse and just find out what it is. How can I stop them from what they're doing at home, hurting themselves so that they can be a better cop when they come back.
Yeah.
And I think that's the personal connection that leadership sometimes looks at. Larger agencies, you're just kind of a number,
Mm.
and we have no idea. I mean, some of the larger agencies probably don't, the chiefs don't know every single officer that works for them,
Right.
but that's getting a road boss and getting them involved. You have 10 people you're in charge of, do check-ins once a month, a simple text message saying, how are things? And hit the spouse as well. How are things at home? We need to get more invested in the family like we used to be uh, than we are now. And hitting the retirees is one thing. Once you retire, people feel like you're out, you're done.
Yeah.
So at least monthly, all my friends in my retired list, I just send a quick, how are things? And most of the time it's, I'm good, which is the typical cop answer for everything. It's I'm good means I'm not good. So you make a phone call, but we just have to find a way to become more like a family again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you're recognizing that retirees also need that support. I've had
Mhm.
multiple conversations where people are like, "Man, like I dedicated 25, 30 years of my life and I sacrificed my relationships and holidays and all the things, and then I left and no one reached out. No one, no one asked me how I was doing, nothing. And I could hear like the heartbreak in that conversation of like, wow, like what was it all for? And I think that we see the statistics for retirement and the life expectancy, and I think that there is a combination of things that happen obviously, but I know that a lot of people just feel like they lose the camaraderie, they lose their purpose, and they feel like no one really cares anymore, and that's tough. So I think it's an important reminder that if you do have people in your network that have retired, to check in on them and see how they're doing, and make sure that they know that they have other people looking out for them, because I can only imagine how tough that would be if you had nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, to the current cops that are working now, I'm sure every one of us has stopped a cop that is retired and tells you that they had 30 years of service. And it's when you have that interaction, ask yourself, do you care that he had 30 years of service? And for me, it's thank you for your service. We have it. And I feel like every time I have that interaction, that the profession has turned its back on the retirees. Like, you're out, you're done. We got it. Go live your life. And we have to find a way to fix that.
Yeah.
So I think just reaching out to a retiree, anytime you can, and just, hey, how are you doing? And I'd like to say, you want to grab a beer, but we can't do that anymore. So maybe grab a lemonade or something, you know?
You can grab a beer every once in a while. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
But I had someone also say, sometimes they'll have like retirees or who will like show up at the station and be like, "Hey, like I worked here 30 years ago and I'm just curious if anything changed." And the conversation was like, give them a tour, like show them around, like, and make them feel like they're a part of it, because they're obviously showing up because they miss it, and they want to see what's going on and want to feel like they're still a part of it. So I think that's an important reminder. I wanted to touch back a little bit because you mentioned this a couple times with FTOs, and how they are instrumental in the culture and training, and I know you guys like really try to work with new hires and get them in there early, and I was hoping that you can explain a little bit about what you guys do in that perspective, but also like the results that you see of that. If you're seeing that it's building more trust and more receptiveness and less stigma.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I think leadership is failing on is that we pick FTOs that have a lot of experience. And when you go back to the four categories that I talked about before, if you put me in a car with a kid that's brand new out of college, my view on law enforcement and the public is going to be a lot different than somebody with 5 years of service that has, maybe games and can make more of a connection with that officer. So what we do here is if, brand new cop that comes in, which I think one, I paired that person with a younger cop. And then I put them with the experienced FTO, and it would be different FTOs. So you get to see this version of a cop that's, hardened. And then you see this version of a cop that is a gamer and is starting out life and probably has a brand new truck in the parking lot, even though I told him not to. But then, it's building the relationship and building a friendship is what I try to do. And then my FTOs, I have three, they follow the officers that they train.
Mm.
So they're responsible for check-ins. If the officer went to a violent domestic or had to do a DOA or any kind of call that they need to check in on, the FTO is making that phone call, a follow-up phone call. And then if I need to get involved at some point, then I make the call.
Mm.
And I make the call to the spouses to say, I just need you to check in. How are things? If you notice anything, I need to know. And we work through the FTOs again to remedy that situation. So yeah, we have to start pairing up. You can't just be the old crusty 25-year veteran that's the field trainer. Unless that person's a superstar and you're seeing a product that is amazing when they're done and they're sticking around. But fresh out of school, especially in Minnesota, they need that training. They need that connection. I don't think they're being trained as well as they should be in our school system. So when they come out to us, they really don't know what they're doing. So building a connection and then having the chief check in on that field, the rookie, and having a conversation of how are things going? How do you like your FTO? Does he yell at you or does she yell at you? What can I do to help? And building that connection with the rookie right away. No matter how big your agency is, you should be shaking hands and checking in with your rookies.
Yeah.
So
And do you think that that is building more trust and breaking stigma if you're like from day one, like, are you okay? This is how we're going to support you. Like, do you think that you're seeing a return on that?
I do. And you have to be genuine when you ask that question, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And if you're a chief that has 5 stars and, everything is polished perfectly and you grew up in my generation of cop and the rookie looks at you and says, my FTO yells at me and I don't like it. You have to acknowledge the fact that that kid just told you that they're getting yelled at. They don't like it. So if you want to keep that cop on the street, you're going to switch FTOs or you're going to make it work
Yeah.
somehow, some way. And you cannot be the hardened, crusty old cop anymore in post 2020. So take care of the rookies, build that connection as soon as you can, and keep that connection. Open door policy. I've heard chiefs. I have an open door policy, but when a rookie walks through the door, you're too busy.
Mhm.
So my policy is no matter what I'm doing, if somebody walks through the door, they get my attention. It might not be for a half hour, but that cop is the most important person in my world that day. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm glad that you said that has to be authentic. And I think that, like, as humans in society, that we've gotten into this habit of these like obligatory check-ins where it's like, hey, how you doing? Good. You? Good. Yeah. And then it's like, there's, I call it like the cotton candy where it's like, it looks good, but there's no substance behind it. It just like kind of like evaporates because there's nothing behind it. And so for you to say, hey, you have to actually be ready for the answer. Like, you have to genuinely ask the answer, and then you also have to be prepared to address the answer, like, are willing to ask the question, and then be willing to address the answer to that. And to also, if you're going to say, hey, I have an open door policy, then you have to be able to actually prove that to people, because I think people are looking to see if your actions and your words match. And if you say you have an open door, and but then every time you walk in, you shoo them away, then they're gonna be like, well, Chief doesn't really care to listen to me. So you're kind of setting those expectations, and everyone's watching to see if you're backing it up.
Yep. If you want to take a pulse of your agency, you do an anonymous survey and you have somebody post the results before you look at them. And that can be a very humbling experience. I've never done it, but I've had chiefs that think they're doing great and their agency loves them. They did the anonymous survey, it came out, and it was embarrassing.
Wow.
Um, if you really think you're that great of a leader and everybody loves you, do an anonymous survey, have your administrative assistant post it, and then you get to look at it when everybody else does. And
That's
that's a good indication of you're doing good or you're not doing good.
Yeah, that's tough. I think you're never ever going to make everyone happy. And I've definitely been in situations where I've done like keynote speaking or whatever it is, and you get like that anonymous feedback after, and you have to be in a really good mental headspace for that because even if you have the best intentions, you're always going to get negative feedback. So you have to kind of prepare yourself. I can't imagine there's ever a department that everyone is going to give 5 stars. There's always going to be, and I think that that's good. I think that there's room for improvement, but that's tough. Have to like take a couple deep breaths before reading that. Um, I know we're kind of getting towards the end here, so I only have a couple more questions for you, but I wanted to talk about your life backpack that you teach. You told me this, and I thought it was really good. So can you explain this concept?
Sure. So we do a lot of stress debriefing and critical incident debriefing, and one of the instructors, I'd love to take credit for it, but I brought up Life's Backpack. Um, so the backpack is full with everything that you have going on in life: financial responsibilities, mortgage payments, truck payments, your kids' baseball game, everything that you have going on in life. And when you come to a critical incident and you go through the trauma of that critical incident, you have a choice whether or not you want to pick that critical incident up and put it in your backpack, or if you want to leave it there. And what I say to everybody is let it go, leave it there. And at the end of your shift, if you still have it in your backpack, make sure that you leave it at the PD before you go home.
Mhm.
And it's, yeah, after hearing that, when I'm on a critical incident, I first try to shield the new officers from what they're seeing. Try to, I have my sergeants and my FTOs are, we try and shield them as much as we can. But at the end of the critical incident, we always tell them, let it go, leave it here,
Mhm.
don't bring it home. And that advice, it's helped me a lot in my career. Just seeing the impacts of, children being taken away from their parents and uh, fatal car crashes and suicides and things. It's when you're on scene, you have to leave it there. And if you still have it when you get home, drive back to the PD, and leave it, and then go home. And it might take a couple times, but you can't bring it home. Um, it's impossible to fill that backpack. It's just with the things you're going to see in this career, you'll fill the backpack in the first 6 months if you let it get full, and then your family will be in jeopardy, and everything else will fall apart. So let it go.
I love that. And it's mental training and it's a mental shift. I know that there's a lot of different um, concepts and how you can do that. I really like that analogy of the backpack of like, don't put it in there, don't take it home. I also know that there's some people who have, there's one I heard yesterday, I've never heard this before, but it was from an officer that said that he has a tree in his front yard. And I don't remember what they called it, like the takeaway tree or something like that. And every time, right before they walk in the door, they put their hand on the tree and they're like, I'm leaving work there. Like, I'm not taking this with me indoors. And there was another person who talked about changing, that they change their uniform into their uniform when they get to work, they change out before they go home. And so, all very like kind of similar concepts of like, how can you in your brain say, like, I am leaving this here? I am not bringing it with me. I am not taking it into my home life, because that is tough. I can only imagine if you were to let that seep into your home life. And I know that's easier said than done, but I really like that idea of the backpack because I can visually say, like, take it out. Like, do not put that in there. So I appreciate you sharing that. The last thing I wanted to kind of share with everyone is that you are married to another chief. And I've never met anyone who also has a spouse who is a chief of police. And we talk about home wellness and, the importance of being able to leave stuff and not bring it home with you and have that separation and have a strong home life. How do you manage that being married to someone else who's not only in this profession, but also in an executive position?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So she was a state trooper for the state of Minnesota for 22 years, and then turned 50 and decided that she was going to be done. And we kind of rolled around a lot of ideas. And I said, why don't you try and be a chief? You have her resume is way longer, better than mine. And she thought initially, I'm not qualified to be a chief. And with her training and experience and everything that she had as a state trooper, I did my best and I said, apply and see what happens. And she applied. I think she had 4 or 5 people against her, several rounds of interviews, and it was the first round interview where they offered her a job.
Mm.
So she's what is it, 12 miles from me, in a smaller agency than I have, but I've been a chief for now 5 years. So I'm on the Chiefs board in Minnesota. I go to IECP. I know a lot of the chiefs across the country, and my portfolio is fairly large. So when she took over as chief, I handed her all of my contacts and said,
Yeah.
"You have a vast network. You know, never struggle, never, never have a question that you don't know how to answer. Pick up the phone and call."
Mm.
And initially, it was calling me, and I said, "You have a network. You know." And sometimes she takes my advice, sometimes she doesn't. And it's like, call other chiefs. And a message to all the chiefs out there: you're not dealing with, this isn't the first time this has happened. Whatever you're dealing with, pick up the phone and call. It can be a larger agency. We all wear the same stars. I mean, it's some have more than most, but pick up the phone and call a larger agency if you're dealing with something and say, how do I get through this? And it's going to make your life so much easier. Branching out, networking, and that's what she's done now. So she's done great. She built her department. She was 50% understaffed when she started, and now she's full staff.
That's,
So she's doing great.
yeah. I appreciate that reminder that, like, you are not alone in this. And I think that it's human nature, but I think especially in leadership roles to kind of like try to bear it on your own and think that, like, you got it, or like you can't reach out for help, or that if you do reach out for help it means that you're not, XYZ, you're not like the leader that you want to be or you think you are, or everyone, whatever, so I think that reminder of, like, hey, like, one, there are other people who are there to support you in your wellness. I think that it's lonely at the top. And so to remember, like, there are people out there that you can talk to if you need to offload some of those things. But also, I like that you said, if you don't know the answer to something, there are other people who have done it and who have done it really well. And how can you reach out to those people so that you can be the best leader? Because we don't know what we don't know. And so if you can start to band together and realize that you guys are all stronger together, then it's only going to improve your organization and it's going to improve policing as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. It's you nailed it. It's if you don't know the answer, reach out. There's chiefs that are willing to answer questions. We have a peer support network in Minnesota that I started in 2021 on the Chiefs board. It's got a list. Are you building a new PD? Anybody that's built a new PD is on there with their contact information. Are you terminating an employee? Are you dealing with a council that is objective to all your ideas? I mean, anything that you have, there's 326 chiefs in the state of Minnesota, and every single one of them's on the list. So pick up the phone and call.
I love the humble flex. You're like, yeah, we have a peer support network that I started. Like, it's very humble flex, but I think that's great. I've heard a lot of states that are trying to follow in that direction of having statewide peer support for chiefs specifically, because there's nowhere to go up and it might not be appropriate to go down. So how can you guys connect and communicate with each other? So I think that's great. My final question for you is, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Something that maybe you wish you would have known, or something that has helped you along the way?
Well, for the first 3 years, this is going to be the most exciting career you've ever been in. And then you're going to get to a point where the 3 to 5 year range, maybe 3 to 7 year range, where you're going to question whether or not you should stay in this profession. Most cops go through it. There's books that have been written on it. And it's one of the things is this is a noble profession. Um, it's a great profession. You get to help people. Don't let the job get to you. Family first. Um, and yeah, stick with it. I have 22 years in, a lot of ups and downs, but I can't see myself doing anything other than this. So
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here
yeah,
and sharing the last 45 minutes with me. If there's anything I missed, I'll let you have the floor, but that's all I have for you. So thank you.
I think we covered it all. Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. I appreciate your time.